November 7, 1956. Bumpy Johnson walked into Juny Bird's apartment and found his best friend sitting in his favorite chair. Coffee was still warm on the table. The television was on. Everything looked normal. Except Juny Bird had been dead for 3 hours. No gunshot wounds. No knife marks. No signs of struggle. Just dead. And when the coroner's report came back 2 days later, it said one word that made Bumpy Johnson's blood run cold. Poison. Someone had killed the only man Bumpy trusted with his life. Someone who knew Juny's routine, knew his habits, knew exactly how to get close enough to murder him without a trace. And when Bumpy discovered who that someone was, it shattered everything he believed about loyalty, family, and the code he'd lived by for 30 years. This is the story they buried with Juny Bird. The story about how Bumpy Johnson learned that the most dangerous enemies aren't the ones pointing guns at you. They're the ones sitting at your dinner table. To understand what Juny Bird meant to Bumpy Johnson, you need to go back to 1932. 24 years before that November morning when everything fell apart. Bumpy was 25 years old, fresh out of a 2-year prison stint for armed robbery. He'd done his time quietly, kept his head down, learned to read Shakespeare and philosophy from an old Jewish inmate who'd been a professor before he killed his wife's lover. Bumpy came out of prison different. Smarter. Colder. And hungry to build something bigger than petty crime. Juny Bird was already in Harlem when Bumpy arrived. His real name was Julius Bird, but everyone called him Juny Bird because he could sing like Billie Holiday and drink like a fish. He was 28 years old, 6'3", built like a brick building, with hands that could crush a man's skull or hold a baby with the gentleness of a saint. He ran numbers for Madame Stephanie St. Clair, the queen of Harlem's policy racket, and he was the best enforcer in the neighborhood. Bumpy and Juny met at a speakeasy on 145th Street. A white gangster from the Bronx, one of Dutch Schultz's crew, had come to Harlem talking loud about taking over the numbers game. He'd brought 5 men with him, all armed, all drunk, all stupid enough to think black men would just hand over their kingdom. Bumpy was at the bar nursing a whiskey when the white gangster walked up to him. "You work for the French woman?" The gangster meant Madame St. Clair, who was Caribbean, but white people couldn't tell the difference. Bumpy looked at him. Didn't answer. Just looked. "I asked you a question, boy." The word boy hung in the air like gunpowder. Every black man in that speakeasy tensed. Hands moved toward waistbands. The jazz band stopped playing. That's when Juny Bird stood up from his table in the corner. He was holding a beer bottle. He walked over slowly, deliberately, and stood next to Bumpy. "He don't work for nobody," Juny said quietly. "And you're in the wrong neighborhood using that word." The white gangster smiled. His 5 men spread out, surrounding Bumpy and Juny. "You gonna do something about it?" What happened next took 17 seconds. Bumpy broke the white gangster's nose with his whiskey glass. Juny smashed his beer bottle across another man's face. The speakeasy erupted. Chairs flew. Bottles shattered. Blood hit the floor. When it was over, 6 white men were unconscious or running. Bumpy and Juny stood back to back, breathing hard, covered in blood that wasn't theirs. Juny looked at Bumpy. "You got a good right hook." Bumpy smiled. "You're not bad with a bottle." They'd been brothers ever since. For 24 years, Juny Bird was Bumpy's right hand. When Bumpy went to war with Dutch Schultz, Juny was there. When Bumpy negotiated with Lucky Luciano, Juny stood outside the door with a shotgun. When Bumpy's wife Mamie needed protection while Bumpy was in prison, Juny slept on their couch for 2 years. Juny Bird wasn't just an enforcer. He was family. He was the man who knew every secret, every deal, every body buried in every basement. He was the man Bumpy called when nobody else could be trusted. And on November 7, 1956, someone killed him. Bumpy found him at 9:43 a.m. He'd come to Juny's apartment on 147th Street for their weekly meeting. Every Wednesday morning, same time, same place. They'd sit, drink coffee, talk business. Who was skimming from the policy banks? Which cops needed paying? Which Italian crews were getting too comfortable in Harlem? Bumpy knocked. No answer. He knocked again. Still nothing. That wasn't like Juny. The man was punctual to the minute. Bumpy used his key. Juny had given him a spare years ago. Just in case. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. The television was on, some morning news program playing to an empty room. Coffee pot was still warm in the kitchen. 2 cups sat on the counter. Juny had been expecting someone. Bumpy walked into the living room. That's when he saw him. Juny Bird was sitting in his brown leather armchair, the one he'd bought in 1948 after Bumpy's first big score. His head was tilted back slightly. His eyes were open. His hands were resting on the armrests, relaxed. For a second, Bumpy thought he was asleep. Then he saw the color. Gray. The kind of gray that only comes when blood stops moving. Juny. Bumpy crossed the room in 3 steps. Put his hand on Juny's neck. No pulse. The skin was cool but not cold. Recent. Very recent. Bumpy stepped back. Looked around. No blood. No weapon. No signs of a fight. The apartment was undisturbed. Juny's wallet was still in his pocket, his watch still on his wrist. This wasn't a robbery. Bumpy looked at the coffee cups in the kitchen. 2 cups. Someone had been here. Someone Juny trusted enough to let into his home. Someone he'd made coffee for. Bumpy's hands were shaking. Not from fear. From rage. From grief. From the realization that his best friend, the most dangerous man he knew, had been killed in his own home without even fighting back. He picked up the phone. Dialed. A man answered on the second ring. "Doc, it's Bumpy. I need you at Juny's place. Now." Dr. Patterson was a surgeon at Harlem Hospital who'd patched up half the gangsters in New York and never asked questions. He arrived 15 minutes later with his medical bag. He examined Juny for 10 minutes in silence. Checked his eyes, his mouth, his pulse points. Finally, he stood up, removed his gloves, and looked at Bumpy. "Poison." Dr. Patterson's voice was grim. "Something fast-acting. Probably in the coffee." His heart stopped within minutes. He wouldn't have felt much. Just confusion, maybe some chest pain, then nothing. "Who?" Bumpy's voice was barely audible. Someone who knew him well enough to get into his apartment. Someone he'd invite in for coffee. That narrows it down. Does it? Dr. Patterson looked at Bumpy carefully. How many people had access to Juny's apartment? Bumpy thought about it. Juny was careful. Paranoid, even. He didn't let strangers in. The list of people he'd make coffee for was very short. Me. Mamie. Quick Lewis. Willie Jackson. Raymond. Bumpy paused. His family. Dr. Patterson nodded. Then that's where you start. But it wasn't that simple. Because Juny Bird's family consisted of one person. His nephew. A 22-year-old kid named Daniel Bird who Juny had raised since Daniel was 8 years old after Daniel's parents died in a fire. Daniel was quiet, respectful, worked as a clerk at a bookstore on 125th Street. Juny had sent him to high school, helped him get the job, kept him away from the streets. Juny loved that boy like a son. And Bumpy had known Daniel since he was a child. Had watched him grow up. Had given him birthday money, bought him his first suit, taught him how to tie a tie. The idea that Daniel could have killed Juny was impossible. Unthinkable. But 2 days later, when the official coroner's report came back, Bumpy learned something that made the impossible real. The poison was cyanide. Not common. Not easy to get. But the coroner found traces of it not just in Juny's coffee, but in Juny's sugar bowl. Someone had mixed cyanide into the sugar, knowing Juny always took his coffee sweet. 2 spoons, every morning, like clockwork. And the only person besides Juny who had a key to that apartment, who knew where Juny kept his spare key, who visited regularly, who Juny would let in without question, was Daniel. Bumpy sat in his office at Wells' restaurant reading the report. His hands weren't shaking anymore. They were steady. Cold. The way they got before he killed someone. Raymond Quick Lewis sat across from him. Raymond was Bumpy's oldest lieutenant after Juny, a man who'd been running numbers since 1935. "You think it's the kid?" Raymond asked carefully. "I don't want to think it's the kid." But the evidence says it's the kid. Why would he do it? Daniel loved Juny. That's what I'm going to find out. Bumpy stood up, put on his hat, picked up his straight razor from the desk. The same razor he'd carried for 20 years. The razor that had opened men from throat to belly. The razor Juny Bird had watched him use 100 times. "Where you going?" "To talk to Daniel." "You want backup?" "No. If I'm wrong, I don't want witnesses. If I'm right," Bumpy's voice went flat. "If I'm right, this is something I need to do alone." Daniel Bird lived in a small studio apartment above the bookstore where he worked. Bumpy arrived at 7 p.m., after the store closed. He climbed the narrow stairs, knocked on the door. Daniel answered. His eyes were red, swollen from crying. He'd been at Juny's funeral the day before, had stood at the grave weeping like a child while they lowered the casket into the ground. "Mr. Johnson." Daniel's voice cracked. "Please, come in." The apartment was tiny. Bed in one corner, small kitchen, desk covered with books. Daniel was a reader, just like Bumpy. Just like Juny had been. Bumpy walked in slowly, eyes scanning everything. Looking for something. Anything. "I'm so sorry about Uncle Juny," Daniel said, wiping his eyes. "I can't believe he's gone." "Sit down, Daniel." Daniel sat on the bed. Bumpy remained standing. "The coroner says it was poison." Daniel's face went pale. "Poison? Who would poison Uncle Juny?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out." Bumpy pulled out the coroner's report, held it up. Cyanide. Mixed into his sugar bowl. Someone who knew his habits. Someone with access to his apartment. Daniel was shaking. "Mr. Johnson, I don't understand. You have a key to Juny's apartment." "Yes. He gave it to me years ago. In case of emergency." "When's the last time you used it?" Daniel hesitated. Just for a second. But Bumpy saw it. That flicker of hesitation. 2 weeks ago. Uncle Juny asked me to pick up some papers for him. He was out, told me to let myself in. "What papers?" "Just," Daniel's voice wavered. "Just some documents. Business stuff." "What kind of business?" "I don't know. I didn't look." Bumpy stepped closer. "Daniel, I've known you since you were 8 years old. I watched Juny raise you. I watched you grow into a good man. So I'm going to give you one chance to tell me the truth. Did you kill Juny Bird?" Daniel Bird looked at Bumpy Johnson with tears streaming down his face and said the last thing Bumpy expected to hear. "Yes. I killed him. But Mr. Johnson, you have to understand why." Bumpy's hand moved to his waistband where the razor lived. His vision went red. Every muscle in his body screamed to end this boy's life right here, right now. But something in Daniel's voice stopped him. Not fear. Desperation. The kind of desperation that comes from carrying a truth too heavy to hold alone. Talk, Bumpy said quietly. And it better be good. Because right now, the only reason you're still breathing is that Juny loved you. Daniel stood up, walked to his desk, pulled out a folder. His hands were shaking so badly he almost dropped it. He opened it, showed Bumpy what was inside. Photographs. Documents. Bank statements. And a letter written in Juny Bird's handwriting. Bumpy took the folder. Started reading. And with each page, his world collapsed a little more. The letter was dated October 15, 1956. 3 weeks before Juny died. It read, Daniel. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. And it means you did what I asked you to do. I know how hard this must have been. I know you're probably destroyed right now. But I need you to understand something. I'm dying anyway. The doctors gave me 6 months. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. There's no treatment, no hope, just slow, agonizing pain until my body shuts down. I've seen men die from this. It's not quick. It's not clean. It's months of suffering, of wasting away, of becoming something less than human. I can't do that to Mamie. I can't do that to Bumpy. I can't let them watch me rot. So I'm asking you to help me leave on my terms. With dignity. While I'm still myself. The cyanide is in the envelope. Mix it in my sugar bowl. Wednesday morning, November 7th. I'll make coffee like always. I'll drink it. And I'll go to sleep. Don't blame yourself. This is my choice. My mercy. My way out. Tell Bumpy the truth when he asks. He'll understand eventually. And if he doesn't, if he kills you for this, then at least you'll have done right by me. I love you, son. You were the best thing that ever happened to me. Juny. Bumpy read the letter 3 times. His hands weren't shaking anymore. They were numb. He looked up at Daniel. He asked you to kill him. Yes, sir. Daniel's voice was barely a whisper. He made me promise. Said if I didn't do it, he'd find another way. A gun. Pills. Something Messier. He said this was cleaner. Kinder. Why didn't he tell me? Daniel pulled out another document. A hospital report from Mount Sinai, dated September 12, 1956. Pancreatic adenocarcinoma, stage 4. Metastatic. Prognosis, 4 to 6 months. Patient declined treatment. He didn't want you to know he was sick. Said you'd try to fix it, spend money on doctors who couldn't help, waste time fighting something that couldn't be beat. He wanted to die on his feet, not in a hospital bed. Bumpy sat down heavily on Daniel's bed. The folder fell from his hands, papers scattering across the floor. 24 years of friendship. 24 years of brotherhood. And Juny hadn't told him. Hadn't given him a chance to say goodbye. Hadn't trusted him with the truth. He should have told me, Bumpy said, and his voice broke. I could have been there. You were there, Daniel said softly. That's why he didn't tell you. He knew if you found out, you'd never leave his side. You'd watch him die slowly, painfully. He loved you too much to make you watch that. Bumpy looked up at Daniel. This 22-year-old kid who'd carried a secret that would have destroyed most men. Who'd killed the person he loved most in the world because that person asked him to. Who'd stood at a funeral and cried real tears while knowing he was the reason for that funeral. How did you do it? Bumpy's voice was flat, empty. How did you put poison in his coffee knowing it would kill him? I almost didn't, Daniel said, tears running freely now. I showed up that morning with the cyanide in my pocket, planning to back out. But Uncle Juny, he knew. He looked at me and said, "You brought it, didn't you?" And I nodded. And he said, "Good. Make the coffee strong. I want to taste it one last time." Daniel's voice broke completely. "He made jokes, Mr. Johnson. While I was poisoning his sugar, he was telling me stories about you two in the old days. About the time you fought Dutch Schultz's crew. About the night you met Lucky Luciano." He was laughing. And I was dying inside. But I did it because he asked me to. Because he begged me to. And after? After, I sat with him. He drank his coffee. Said it was perfect. We talked for maybe 5 minutes. Then he said he was tired. Closed his eyes. And he was gone. Peaceful. Like falling asleep. Bumpy stood up. Walked to the window. Looked out at Harlem. The streets Juny had protected for 24 years. The neighborhood they'd built together. The kingdom that now felt empty. Does anyone else know? No, sir. Just you and me. The police? Closed the case. Listed it as natural causes. Heart failure. They didn't look too hard. Another dead black man in Harlem wasn't worth the paperwork. Bumpy turned around. His face was different now. Not angry. Not cold. Just broken. Grief had carved lines into his features that hadn't been there an hour ago. "He made you promise not to tell me." "Not exactly. He said I should tell you if you asked directly. Said you deserved the truth. But he hoped you wouldn't ask. Hoped you'd just think he died in his sleep." "Why?" Daniel picked up another paper from the floor. A handwritten note, different from the letter. Shorter. Just 3 lines. "Bumpy. Don't be mad at the boy. He gave me what doctors couldn't. A good death. Take care of him for me." Bumpy read those 3 lines and something inside him shattered. He'd spent 2 days planning how to kill Daniel. Spent 2 days consumed with rage, with the need for revenge. And now he understood. Daniel wasn't a murderer. He was a mercy. A final act of love from a dying man who wanted to control the one thing he had left. His ending. Bumpy looked at Daniel. This kid who'd done the hardest thing a person could do. Who'd carried it alone for 2 days. Who'd been prepared to die for it. Did he suffer? "No, sir." Daniel's voice was firm. It was fast. Peaceful. He didn't suffer. Good. That's good. The silence stretched between them. Outside, Harlem was waking up for the evening. Cars honking. People shouting. Music spilling from open windows. Life continuing like Juny Bird hadn't just been erased from it. Bumpy walked to the door. Stopped with his hand on the knob. "You did right by him, Daniel. I don't know if I could have done what you did. But you gave him what he wanted. And that takes a kind of courage most men don't have." "Mr. Johnson," Daniel's voice cracked. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry you had to find out this way." Bumpy turned around. His eyes were wet. Not crying, but close. "Me too, son. Me too." He left Daniel's apartment at 8:17 p.m. Walked down to the street. Got in his car. Drove to Wells' restaurant. Sat in his office alone until 3 a.m., drinking bourbon and reading Juny's letter over and over. Raymond Quick Lewis found him there at dawn. "Boss, you okay?" Bumpy looked up. His eyes were red. "No. I'm not okay. But I will be." "You find out who killed Juny?" "Yeah. I found out. And sometimes the truth is worse than the lie. Raymond sat down across from him. You want to talk about it? No. Bumpy folded the letter, put it in his jacket pocket. But I need you to do something for me. Daniel Bird. Juny's nephew. I want him protected. 24/7. Nobody touches him. Nobody threatens him. He's family now. Raymond nodded slowly. Understood more than Bumpy said. Understood that whatever Bumpy had learned, it had changed something fundamental. You got it, boss. And Raymond, one more thing. If I die, I mean when I die, whenever that is, I want it to be quick. Clean. No hospitals. No slow fade. You understand what I'm saying? Raymond met his eyes. Understood perfectly. I understand. Good. Now get out. I need to think. Bumpy Johnson sat in his office for another 3 hours. Thinking about friendship. About loyalty. About the difference between murder and mercy. About how the people you love most can hurt you deepest not through betrayal, but through love. Juny Bird had loved him enough to lie. To hide his death. To spare him the pain of watching. And Bumpy didn't know if he could forgive that. But he also understood something new. Something that changed how he saw everything. Control was an illusion. Power was temporary. And the only thing that mattered in the end was choosing how you left. With dignity. On your terms. Surrounded by people who loved you enough to let you go. 3 weeks later, Bumpy visited Juny's grave. Brought a bottle of bourbon, Juny's favorite. Poured half on the ground, drank half himself. You stubborn bastard, Bumpy said to the headstone. You should have told me. Should have let me say goodbye properly. The wind blew through the cemetery. Leaves scattered across the grave. But I get it. I understand why you did it. And I'm not mad at Daniel. He gave you what you asked for. That's more than most people would do. Bumpy sat down on the ground, leaned against the headstone. 24 years, Juny. We built something, didn't we? Built a kingdom. Protected our people. Made sure Harlem stayed ours. And you never asked for anything except loyalty. And in the end, you gave me a lesson I didn't want to learn. He took another drink. His voice dropped to a whisper. You taught me that love sometimes means letting go. That strength isn't always fighting. That the hardest thing a man can do is accept help from the people he's supposed to protect. Bumpy stood up slowly. Put the bottle on the grave. Rest easy, brother. You earned it. And when my time comes, I hope I have half your courage. I hope someone loves me enough to give me what you got. A good death. On my terms. With dignity. He walked away without looking back. Because looking back would break him. And Bumpy Johnson couldn't afford to break. Not yet. Not while Harlem still needed him. Daniel Bird continued working at the bookstore. Bumpy sent money every month. Anonymous envelopes with no return address. Never asked for anything in return. Just made sure Juny's nephew, the boy who'd given his uncle mercy, had what he needed. And 16 years later, when Bumpy Johnson died of a heart attack at Wells Restaurant on July 7, 1968, Daniel Bird was there. He'd been having lunch at a nearby table. Coincidence, maybe. Or maybe not. When Bumpy collapsed, Daniel was the first to reach him. Held his head. Checked his pulse. And whispered something that nobody else heard. Whatever Daniel said, Bumpy's eyes opened one last time. He looked at Daniel. And he smiled. A real smile. Peaceful. Understanding. Then Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson, the godfather of Harlem, closed his eyes and died the same way Juny Bird had. quickly. Surrounded by someone who loved him. On his own terms. Some people said it was just a heart attack. Natural causes. But the people who knew, the ones who understood, they knew different. They knew that sometimes mercy looks like murder. Sometimes love looks like betrayal. And sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is letting them choose their ending. That's the story they buried with Juny Bird. The story about how Bumpy Johnson learned that loyalty isn't about living for someone. It's about being brave enough to help them die when death is the only mercy left. If this story about love, loss, and the impossible choices we make for the people we care about moved you, hit that subscribe button. Drop a like if you understand that sometimes the hardest question isn't who killed someone, but why. Share this with someone who knows that real strength isn't always fighting. Comment below, would you have done what Daniel did? And remember, the people who love you most will sometimes hurt you deepest, not through betrayal, but through the mercy of protecting you from pain they're willing to bear alone.